Hi everyone, David Walsh, Secret Sandland here, and today I'm going to talk about a Greenwich pensioner that I've discovered who lived in Southport during the late 1860s and early 1870s. And I stumbled across this man by looking at the 1868 plan for Southport and Birkdale. Now I was curious as to what I thought was one large building. The directory lists two properties facing Manchester Road. I think there was possibly another two adjoined, going towards Hall Street. Now, in 1868, what was living in what was then number 56 Manchester Road is a guy called Thomas Parkin. Now, Thomas Parkin lived here, this house behind me. I think it's number 78 Manchester Road today. Anyway, back in 1868, this was number 56 Manchester Road, and it was called Alma House. Now, there's a reason it was called Alma House, which I'll come to shortly. His occupation is described as superintendent of lunatics. Now, I think lunatic was a term used in the 19th century to describe anyone with any condition or mental illness. So his job was superintendent of lunatics at the Halifax Union. That's where he worked. And if you look back when he got married in 1866 to a lady called Elizabeth Hampson. He was then aged 49, a bachelor aged 49. She was widowed. I think Hampson was her first married name. Her maiden name was Winstanley. She came from Salford, and his job title on the marriage certificate is Superintendent of Imbeciles for the Halifax Union. That's where they lived. I think they moved to Southport in around 1867, because on the 1868 directory they're living in this house here. If you look back on the map on the first part of the video, you can see that the building looks rather much larger than what it is today. I think there was probably another pair of houses at the back. They were possibly taken down during 1870 when Hall Street developed. They're not shown on the 1889 urban survey map. However, I'm just going to talk about his Thomas Parkin's early life now. He was born in Sheffield in 1817 and joined the Royal Marine Artillery in 1835, in which he had 23 years active service. He received the China Medal in the First China War, and then he was in the Crimean War in the 1850s. This is a term that was used. Apparently he was up the Baltic at the taking of Bomersund, and he was present at the taking of the fort under Sir Charles Napier. He received the Crimean Medal, which was a blue ribbon and clasp, and was present at the storming of Sebastopol, and also took part in the Great Siege under Admiral Lord Lyons. So he was quite a decorated and noted serviceman. He's still here in the 1870 electoral register, but when we get to the 1871 census, he is listed at another building in Southport, which we're going to go to now. So we're now stood outside the old Southport Infirmary. Before I talk about the infirmary, I'm just going to recap a couple of points from the last house on Manchester Road. So it was called Alma House as it was named after. Alma was one of the battles of the Crimean War, of course, which Thomas Parkin fought in. He discharged himself from the Royal Marines Artillery in 1858, and in 1861 he was found back in his native Sheffield. Of course, as I mentioned, he moved to Southport in 1867, and in the 1871 census he's found here, which is the old Southport Infirmary, and you can just about see on the gatepost here the words infirmary still there. So in the 1871 census he's the master of the infirmary, and Elizabeth is the matron, and they're under George Augustus Combe, later Pilkington. Of course, he was the first MP of Southport. So the Southport Infirmary was built during 1870 to meet the need of the rapidly growing town of Southport. Of course, there was a section which is now demolished. There's a couple of images just going on your screen now, courtesy of Billy Vitch in the Southport of Yesterday group on Facebook, to show what the front part of the infirmary looked like. And as I said, it was to meet the needs of the growing town. He worked here as the master of the infirmary up until 1873, when unfortunately his health deteriorated, and this is where he died in 1873 at his place of work. And we're now going to go to Duke Street Cemetery to show you his grave. So here we are at Duke Street Cemetery, one of the most beautiful of God's acres in the country when it opened. I'm just going to find the final resting place of Thomas Parkin. Right, it's around here somewhere. Right, okay. Let's make our way as best we can. I've spotted this grave on findagrave.com and was able to locate it. It's in section E by looking at some of the other gravestones that are present in the photo. Here we go. Very overgrown, as you can see. Let's get as best we can here. I've managed to clear a bit of the blackberry bushes out of the way. Here we go. It says Thomas Parkin, late master of the Southport Infirmary for upwards of 23 years in the Royal Marine Artillery, serving his country in the First China and Crimean Wars. Born at Sheffield, June 21st, 1817. Died at Southport, November the 27th, 1873. Interned with military honours, December the 3rd, 1873. Deeply regretted. Also of Elizabeth, widow of the above, Thomas Parkin, who departed this life September 2nd, 1879, aged 58 years. A loving mother, deeply regretted. Also of Arthur Hampson Harrison, grandson to the above, who died November 11th, 1880, aged just 11 months. So this is the final resting place of Thomas Parkin. I'm now going to read out the visitor report of his funeral. It was the wish of the deceased, we understand, that when he died he should be buried with military honours, and his last wish was scrupulously complied with. On Wednesday morning at 10:30, a plumed hearse removed the remains from the infirmary, and the body was followed to the grave by a numerous company of mourners. The band of the 13th Lancashire Rifle Volunteers headed the cortege, and after the hearse and mourners came a party of the 26th Lancashire Artillery Volunteers, commanded by Captain Stanley, and a detachment of the 13 Lancashire Rifle Volunteers, under the command of Lieutenant Stopford. As the funeral passed along the main roads heading to the cemetery, the band played the Dead March in Saul, and hundreds of spectators assembled to witness the funeral pass. At about 11:30, the cemetery gates were reached, and all along the pathway to the mortuary chapel, persons who had known Mr. Parkin in life were waiting to see the last ceremony performed. A party of the 13th under Sergeant Maddock was told to remove the body from the hearse. The remains, which were placed in a substantial oak coffin, were placed on a trestle. The coffin in question was enveloped in a British Union Jack, and on the lid rested a beautiful wreath of choice of cut flowers. The Reverend F.S. Minton, curate of Christchurch, met the corpse in the prescribed manner, and the civil and military mourners, with many of the infirmary officials, seated themselves in the chapel, where the impressive burial service was read. Among those present were G.R. Carter, treasurer of the infirmary, Mr. Falcon, auditor, Dr. Elias and Dr. G.A. Woods, the medical officers, and Dr. G.A. Coombe, the house surgeon. Mr. Robert Johnson, the honorary secretary, and Captain Walker,
Mr. Satterthwaite, Mr. G. Blundell and many others. At the conclusion of the prayers there was some delay in consequence of the preparations outside not being complete. When it was announced that all was ready, the coffin was removed to the grave, where a firing party was in attendance with their arms reversed. As the procession marched to the graveside, the scene was striking. The minister's white gown contrasted with the sombre attire of the mourners, and the bright red uniform of the 13th was brought out in relief by the green grass. The service being concluded, the firing party discharged 3 volleys over the grave, and the ceremony was brought to an end. We regret to state, however, that in consequence of some unaccountable mismanagement, the coffin could not be lowered to the bottom, as its last resting place was not sufficiently spacious. After the burial, the volunteers marched off the ground, and the band playing a gay tune according to custom when military honours are observed. The funeral arrangements were well conducted by Mr. Berry of Tulcove Street.
So that's the story of Thomas Parkin, who would have been quite a serviceman in his day. He was only in Southport 5 or 6 years maybe, master of the infirmary, very well decorated, and in 1873 there was a full military honours funeral right here at this spot, which was, it's actually said in the Visitor at the time, it was quite a rarity for this locality. So yeah, so thanks for watching. Keep following Secret Sandland on Twitter, Facebook. Keep an eye out for me forthcoming walks and talks. Thank you.